Welcome to No Fluff, Just Ideas. This is your host, Sophocles, and we're going to be discussing investment ideas from around the world. So buckle up and enjoy. This podcast is for educational purposes only. Full disclaimer at the end of the podcast. So today I am very happy to welcome Rin Narakornpijit. Did I just murder your name, Rin, or is that okay?
It's okay. Perfect. Yeah.
So Rin is a co-portfolio manager at Kasikorn Asset Management in Bangkok, Thailand. She is a Kellogg MBA graduate. I met Rin when she came to the Vietnam event I organized in March. It's always great to have more women at the events to bring their perspective. By the way, I have been organizing these in-person events in Asia and Cyprus, and we'll be launching a first event in Brazil, in Rio in June. So feel free to reach out by checking out fatalphavalue.com. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for doing this. The reason I asked for Rin to do this is because she did this very interesting presentation in Ho Chi Minh about memory and how it relates to the demand in AI. And I felt like I learned a lot, and I feel like people listening can also learn from Rin. So welcome, Rin, to the podcast.
Thanks, Sophocles. Thanks for having me again. And today I would love to talk about memory again.
Help us understand, assuming someone knows nothing about how memory comes into play here, and all they know is that they're going on to ChatGPT and asking it questions. Why is memory important? Why is there a need for memory?
Okay, so let me recap the supply chain first. So let's start with from our side, because I think you and me, most people will subscribe and pay to any of these model provider like ChatGPT or Anthropic or Claude. So it starts from us paying them, right? $20 per month. And then these model providers, they pay to hyperscalers or data centers to rent their capacity to run their models. And then these data centers, they have to have something to be able to run the model for. And the data centers, then they buy GPU from NVIDIA, from AMD, or now there are like many ASICs players, which is like Google TPU. They produce their own, they design their own chips as well. And for these chips, for this compute, they're smart brain, right? But you cannot be so smart without remember things. And then that's why these guys like NVIDIA, they also have to buy memory. And for memory, there are three players. For DRAM, let's focus on DRAM for today. For DRAM, there are three players in the world that can produce memory used for AI. So which are Samsung, SK Hynix, both listed in South Korea, and one more is Micron. Yeah, so these are the whole structure of it. And since I think you mentioned SanDisk in your Substack, so let me explain a little bit the difference between two types of memories. So it is similar like big family, but there's two main type, which is working memory, which I would like to focus on today, which is DRAM. And also another memory type is storage, named like SanDisk, SSD, and other like are like HDD, hard disk drive. So for the easy analogy, I want to talk about iPhone. When you buy iPhone, right, there you can pick the numbers, like big numbers, like 500 gigabyte, 1 terabyte. Those are storage, where you want to put your files, video files, and then a small number like 8 gigabyte or 12 gigabyte. Those are working memory, or it's the reason that you can like switch between apps quickly. For the AI memory theme, I'm actually think both storage and the working memory both have big potential. But the fact that I would love to touch on DRAM today, because the valuation probably more.
Okay, so the data centers, like our iPhone, they need the storage, which is the Western Digital, SanDisk, whatever. But they need the memory, and they also need the GPUs in order to calculate the compute, to do the compute. Is that how it comes into play? Because most people just think of NVIDIA when it comes to AI.
Yeah, so NVIDIA is these DRAM players' customer. So these days for HBM, the type of DRAM used with GPU, it's high bandwidth memory. In order for it to be able to plug in and use smoothly with NVIDIA GPU or the brain, then you need things very high bandwidth, high capacity, very fast for data transfer. Because NVIDIA brain is super smart, you need someone as smart to be able to plug in. So that's why for this cycle, it's going to be a little bit hard for new players, for newcomers to come in, because there's also, you need technology and the manufacturing mastery that you accumulate for decades in order to make this HBM, which is the advanced versions of DRAM. So you stack the normal DRAM dies up and then put it together to like increase the bandwidth, the capacity, and these create heat, yield loss, and packaging challenges because you put these HBM right next to NVIDIA GPU. So these DRAM players have technology modes as well. They're not just the basic commodity
Okay, so if I
company.
understand then, all our conversations when we're going on to Claude and Gemini, the conversation is stored within the storage, and then when we're asking questions, it's sort of like sucked into whatever the memory has to look at all this data or all this information, and then before doing the compute. And so if we have a lot of data and there's a lot of stuff it has to put into its memory, it means the data centers then need more and more memory. That, is that pretty much the case?
Exactly. Yeah.
One thing, I think you said something about one book is equivalent to, what was that?
So I'm talking about the context window of the model. So I think you probably heard people complaints about like, oh, AI still forgets, blah, 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 blah. So that's from many reasons, but one of the reason is that it's the context window limitation. So for now, in the past. And that's also the reason that memory price spiked around third quarter of last year is when all the models are expanding their context window. So last year, each these models, they have around 100,000 context window, which means one book, the length, the words in one book is around 100,000 words. So one words is roughly one token. It's not one to one, but roughly. So which mean current context, the past year, in the last year, context window of a model can hold the conversation of over 100,000 words. Mean if I give the model around 200,000 words PDF, then it will not be able to answer everything because the model can go and take only half of that file and information in that file. That was the limitation last year. And then then these model providers, they realize that, oh, okay, it's not enough because everyone complained, right? That model cannot reason really well and also not enough. They still forget a lot of stuff. Then now everyone raised to increase their context window. So now the frontier models like Claude, Opus 4.7, the current one, and also GPT 5.5 now at around 1 million context window. So it's a big jump from last year. Last year they were at like 100,000. And then for Grok, the one by Elon Musk, this one is now already at 2 million. So the trend is that these context window keeps increasing. And where are we heading? I already mentioned 100,000 is one book. And now we are at 10 books because that 1 million context window. And where are we heading? So do you think that we are super smart brain that can only process only 10 books, is that smart enough? So I don't think
Hmm.
it's smart
Hmm.
enough, right? So that's why we are heading like more and more like Grok now reaching already 2 million, but everything really depend on how much memory these guys can supply because there's a lot of supply constraint. So just consensus now believe that this memory constraint will last until 2027 to 2028. That's why the stocks are trading at like 5 times forward PE, which I think it's a bit undervalued. So for me, based on context window calculation, where we should head going forward, I think the undersupply should last until 2030. So that's why I think this cycle is long.
So how did you come to that conclusion? I mean, did you make a calculation of how much big the context window needs to be? Is that, and you backed out the numbers?
Exactly. That's a lot of assumptions that I put in. Directionally, it should be that way. And then I cross check my number with management guidance. So for SK Group, the chairman already said that this cycle should, the undersupply should last until 2030. The undersupply situation, I think we are at like 50%. When I look at management guidance for Micron, the CEO also said now we are only able to fulfill only half to turtle in client demand. So I think my number is not that unrealistic. And also Samsung in the past week earnings call, the company also said that the undersupply situation should worsen in 2027 compared to 2026. So I think that's where we're going. And now we're just talking about the text file, right? Everything is about the chatbot now. But going forward, we're gonna go to like more picture files and video
Mm-hmm.
files with Edge AI. So in order to process kind of video files, you use computers for years. You know the size
Mm-hmm.
difference between the text file, picture files, and video files.
Okay, just to play devil's advocate here, why do you think they're being, like the analysts or whatever, being so conservative with regard to the context windows, and you figured out that it's a lot different?
So let's me start with the big picture first. The AI capex, these hyperscalers, the big tech Max 7, will spend together, they will announce each year their capex spending, and most will go to AI spending. So in the past 3 years, consensus significantly underestimated this number for 3 years in a row. So they will started with something like 20% year-on-year growth, and then the actual number actually came in around 60% plus. So that's a big like gap, right? So AI demand is so unprecedented that people are kind of like they stay conservative. If you have to publish papers and everyone to see it, being conservative is more, yeah. So that's why. But my point is it's so unprecedented that people got it quite low, like very low every year. And then for that's why at the beginning of the year, each year, there will be like narrative like, oh, AI is in bubble, ChatGPT will never be profitable or something like that. Because people cannot even project next year growth of the capex that can spend to this AI
Mm-hmm.
ecosystem. Yeah, so that's one thing. So for 2027, again, now the number of forecasts of next year is around 20%. And then some brokers started to move the number up to like 30%, 40% because we are 4 months in and they see some trends. And in past week, Google just said that we will spend for AI capex for 2027 significantly more than 2026. So this is start like some hints like this start and then estimate will be raised. So this is the picture of the overall
I see.
ecosystem. And just to give you the absolute number, the size for you to be able to visualize this better. So the each year, like this past year, $500 billion are spent on AI capex by these hyperscalers. So that's Thailand's annual GDP. So it's a country basically. So now the AI ecosystem is the country, which is, yeah, it's huge, right? Yeah, and it will grow larger and larger from here. So we pay to ChatGPT, ChatGPT read the hyperscalers then buy GPU, then buy GPU like NVIDIA, then buy memory. For NVIDIA or any ASICs players, they will give guidance, right? NVIDIA have like the 1 trillion number that they gave. And then memory analysts then use that. But the problem, yeah, so which is quite conservative and makes sense if the undersupply situation is not that bad. But if you get to the number which these memory players can supply, because the procurement team, they work together, right? NVIDIA and the memory players. So you will not get the real actual demand, which is huge, but you will get whatever NVIDIA is allocated by these memory players. That's why the memory demand is underestimated. So I model based on what the model layers or end user like us would like to have, which is big context window. And this is context window is still really, I do it like really in a really simplified way, because after that it's going to be agentic AI and then Edge AI, and then those video files will get another like massive wave of like demand for memory.
So my question then is, why the big three players being Micron, Hynix, and Samsung? Isn't there the scenario where they can dramatically increase supply, and so then the price comes down and their revenue growth slows?
Yeah, so that's the main scares that everyone have, right? It's commodity. Let me recap also the industry what happened in the past 20 years. So 20 years ago, there were like more than 10 players in this DRAM world. And then with this kind of, like you said, like people produce a lot, expand, and then dump the market. And then there were like Taiwanese, Japanese, German DRAM players, and they're all gone. And some even got acquired by Micron. And then for these past 20 years, now we consolidated back to three players. And then these three players, they learn that kind of like irrational expansion may not be beneficial or healthy to the three players. So that's why now they're really not conservative, but like rational when they expand new capacity. However, now, even though I said that, oh, now we have three players left, it's still commodity. So back in the most recent down cycle was in 2023. So you remember COVID, right? Consumer electronics demand boom. And then this happened. And then suddenly but it was front loaded in 2020 to 2022. And then in 2023, demand is gone because people go back to work. No more work from home, not as much as before. And then their demand just like suddenly gone, but their capacity is already there. So that's why they actually make loss. They're turned red since like gross profit line, not OPM, but gross profit. So even though back to just three players, they are still commodity. I have to admit this. I never say that they're no longer commodity. So yeah, but now they just become more rational and learn from past cycle what could happen. But the most important thing is that the demand for COVID is temporary, right? It's not a mega trend. Once we got vaccine, once we go back to the office, then demand's done. But this time, we are building artificial intelligence, and I would like everyone to like visualize this way that this is the first time in human history that we are building intelligence that will exceed human intelligence. And then for us, that's why I said it's so unprecedented. For us, our hardware, it's limit. We are prepackaged. This is 100,000 years old brain. This is very old, right? Ancient. So you cannot add neurons and anything. It's prepackaged. But for AI, it's totally different. You can buy more and more DRAM, and then I will have like this like crazy memory that I can recall everything, and then have big storage. I remember everything that happened in the past 30 years because AI will be able to do that, but we are bound by this like biological limitation. So that's why this cycle is long, because this is the first time that they're trying to like exceed human intelligence. And the goal, like people said that, oh, this is just chatbot. But from what I see, the midterm goal of these AI labs, they want to build AGI, or artificial general intelligence, which means you basically build a really smart human with agency, with like willpower to do stuff. Then assume if you can build a Steve Jobs, work 24/7 and never dies, that's a lot of money. Yeah, so that's the direction.
It changes certain things going forward. So anyway, but you are right. I mean, the whole idea for doing this discussion is also that some of these things are still trading pretty cheaply. Micron, Samsung, Hynix are still. I think Hynix is like 4 times earnings or something.
They're on average for PE around 5 times on average.
One, you've made the case that the market is missing the demand, and and that the demand's going to be there for a lot longer than currently estimated. Is there anything else that you think the market is missing then?
Yeah, so I think what market disliked the most, especially value investors, the earning visibility. Because because this commodity back in 2023, the consumer electronics demand's gone, and then they made loss, right? These are type of invisibility that they hate. But what actually changing in this cycle is the LTAs, or long-term agreement. So this is first ever in the history of memory industry that these LTAs are introduced. They are like long-term agreement. The news says should last for like 3 to 5 years. And then we have no idea about the terms of these LTAs, because Micron already signed one. Samsung just said in the past week that they signed with some customers. SK Hynix hasn't formally disclosed any that they have signed, but We have no idea about the structures because they're still signing with more and also maybe NDA as well. So those we have no idea. But what these LTA really changed is that if it's locked for like 3 to 5 years, then we know that at least there'll be someone that will take these volumes in the next 3 to 5 years and maybe even with prepayment. So this is why uncertainty profile has changed, which is triggered by the demand, right? Because the demand is so overwhelming. Their customers are so scared to not get enough allocation. If you wanna look on news, there is even news that some of the big tech fired their procurement team last year that they couldn't secure these memory volumes. Then this year, now this LTA has been introduced, and for this year and next year, free cash flow yield of these companies are 20%. That's a lot, right? Compared to like Nvidia's like Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, all free cash flow yield around low single digit. So if they can produce this 20% yield, but locked with this LTA, which means this yield will last for the next 3 to 5 years. That's mean you get your money
Hmm.
back in 5 years. That's changed all these. That's what market dislike, which is uncertainty. Now this LTA will change everything. And compared to the past contract, normally these memory contract are contracted each quarter, which means you have zero visibility beyond the 90 days. So that's why this changed a lot of, yeah, I think the uncertainty profile has changed significantly with LTAs.
The high demand because of this AI thing and the long term agreements possibly changes that. Of course, the long term agreements, they can always say, well, you know what, we don't need so many chips. So maybe that changes in a year's time. I don't know. So there's still some uncertainty, and I guess the investors will have to get somewhat more comfortable with that. But it's not like other companies with long term agreements have no risk at all as well. So
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's the skeptics will always talk about these LTAs that actually back in 2023, LTAs are signed in semiconductor industry and then the contract later got broken, which that's why people are still concerned with these LTAs for this cycle as well. So I have to totally admit that that could be the case. They can just walk away. Actually, we don't really because market is so forward looking. This is like a bad argument. I will have a very good argument. This is first one first. So this is not a bad, maybe a little bit loose argument that we don't need to wait for
yes.
this to play out the next 5 years, right? Because market is very forward looking. The fact that if yeah, assume that these players can just sustain the current cash flow per quarter for the next 2 3 quarters. That's who I think the narrative around the stocks will change to buybacks and then dividends. And then these are stuff that value investors love. So, and sell side analysts will have sell side reports around like by the end of 2027, the free cash, the cash on the
Yep.
balance sheets is around 40% of market cap. Assume that they don't pay out anything in the meantime. So yeah, so I think these will help re-rate the stocks. And now we're trading at
Yep.
5 times. I never asked anyone to pay 20 times. The past cycle is around 10 times. It ended cycle at 10 times. So just re-rate from 5 to 10 should be possible because now the market has more visibility. Stocks has better earning visibility. Why can't they at least re-rate to the past cycle where the visibility was worse?
So I think anything. I mean, I don't see why these can't re-rate. I think anything can re-rate at the end of the day. And like you said, if they see the cash piling up and the free cash flow yield, then I think investors will reconsider. But you say, there's going to be this very high free cash flow yield, but that would imply they they're not going to increase their investments.
It's actually possible because their capex is mainly clean room and the machine, like EUV machine by ASML. So once they can see that, okay, actually demand for our demand forecast is wrong, then they can stop ordering those tools. And that's how they can cut capex right away. Even though the clean room may be sticky because they already committed with like contractors and stuff, but for tools, they can just cut it. Yeah. So now their strategy is to have so their capex now. The company give guidance to that they will build clean rooms. That's a priority. And then if they see demand, then they just fill in tools. So this is really safe and on their income statement as well, because clean room, it's a construction, right? You can sorry, it's a property. You can depreciate for like decades, like 10 years more, 20, 30 years. But these tools are 5 to 7 years. So it's even safer to their income statement and also on their balance sheet to do it this way, which is build clean room first. And if demand is still overwhelming, then you plug in the tools. So that's how it works now. So that's why I think even though average selling price start to taper or come down in 2029 or 2030, they can still be able to cut down capex. That's why I think that 20% free cash flow yield sounds, which means that you can get your money back in 5 years, even though ASP start to taper.
What do you think about Google came out with a paper that they won't need as much memory as thought? I don't remember what exactly that was right now off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was Turbo Quant. They actually released that paper on the week that we were in Vietnam. So yeah, so that's why like on everyone asked me so much at the event. So that's the compression technique to use less memory. Okay. With all due respect to Google, but that paper is actually an academic paper that already released a year ago. And then they just happened to tweet it again. So it kind of scared the market because this 6 times number, it's huge, right? If they can deploy it in the current global scale. But the point is that that paper still academic paper, and they run on a really any not very but like small parameter of the current frontier model size. So we still have no idea when it's really deployed and how should it work. However, if we trace back in the past years, there's always an like attempts for these AI labs to reduce their memory use because memory is so expensive now. It's up like 4 to 6 times from last year. Everyone wants to save the money. It's a lot of money. Yeah, so that's why even like the Chinese lab, they figure out way to compress this memory use by 30 times. That's way more than Google. And still, HBM volume, the high bandwidth memory volume, still sold out till 2026. So my point is the end demand is so big that this kind of like compression technique here and there still cannot remove the overwhelming demand. So that's one thing. And then another thing, there's another argument, but I'm not a big fan of, which is Jevons paradox, which means if you increase efficiency and reduce cost of something, then there are more users and it's like the total TAM is larger. But for me, that's really midterm story. Like I find Jim Wan's paradox not an argument that I want to use for Jim Wan's. If Google can really figure out the most efficient way to reduce memory use by 6 times, that's the risk, and we should be careful on that. It's not. Yeah, for me, it's that. However, I have another argument is that one day I think the government will have to, but this is a bit midterm story too. The government will finally come and regulate these models. And at that point, you cannot really compress away everything. It's just like you cannot compress away how you reason to give someone an answer, right? Because government need to be able to audit, compress things too much to the level that you cannot audit back, and that create another problem. So, but that's really long term. I feel like we may not even have to wait that long for the market to understand about that the fact that 5 times is a bit undervalued because now the memory has become so critical, but the memory company stays so undervalued that maybe backward integration.
I do agree with you. You are
Yeah,
right. I mean, you don't need 5 years of 20% free cash flow for the stocks to re-rate. You get like 1 year of that, and then 1 year forward, and the stocks could easily re-rate. Exceptions can change easily. So Rin, since
okay.
there's this big demand and
Yeah, yeah,
Nvidia
yeah,
can't
yeah, okay.
keep up with buying enough memory, how about Nvidia or someone else who's huge, one of those top 10, I guess, or Tesla, right? Micron or Hynix. I mean, maybe they just wake up and say, you know what, or merge with them or buy them. Isn't that a possibility? And maybe why hasn't that even happened yet?
Yeah, so it's subject to a lot of regulations, and I'm not suggesting anything here, but according to my high school math, uh, these are possibilities. Yeah, and also these guys they would love to lock in volume. That's why these are LTA. Therefore, backward integration kind of makes sense. Yeah, but I'm not suggesting anything. Just yeah, I'm just sharing. So that's why I said like we may not have to wait that long for all value investor to feel convinced with the 20% free cash flow yield. Be someone with bigger check can just go and like yeah, and then that's it, subject to regulators and everything. But my point is that the fact that they trade at 5 times PE, that these kind of risk,
Hmm.
you if like we feel this kind of risk, something is being mispriced. That's more my point.
I think we're still far from it being like a human brain sort of thing. I don't know
Yeah.
if you have any thoughts on that.
So this is actually another reasons why all the model expanded their context window. So that's why the memory price spike in of last year was when so ChatGPT they came up with reasoning AI back in 2024, but the who democratized the reasoning AI that allow AI to
Hmm. Hmm.
reason
Hmm.
instead of like predict the next word is actually you remember the DeepSeek moment. So DeepSeek they open sourced how to make AI reason, and then that's why other labs they raised to this reasoning AI. And you feel that in the past year AI has reasons better. So and it should go that way if they have enough hardware to better and smarter hardware to be run on for these models. So you can see small improvement. Yeah, so that's also one of the reasons memory price spike is that models realize that AI is smarter if when you reason. It just like when we reason a lot, like back in the predictive AI day, it's like I asked you what's your name and then you told me your name, right? That's you require zero reason. Yeah, so that's why you feel like the AI is really they just follow everything you say. It's super agreeable, too agreeable. But now with the larger context window and many other reasons on the model side, that's why AI has reasons better in the past year, and it should be better and better going forward.
Okay, so Rin, if feel free if you have something to add, but if you don't, you can give us a sort summary before we wrap it up.
Yeah. So let me summarize again. So again, because our biological DRAM limitation, I know everyone struggle to recall everything we just talked about in the past 30 minutes, right? And now everyone understand what is actually DRAM is the ability to pull all information and use it now. So that's DRAM. Okay. So three reasons just to summarize everything we discussed today, why I think currently at forward 5 times PE of these memory names may be undervalued is that these AI memory demand are structural. Number two is that the cash flow uncertainty profile has changed with LTAs, which is also triggered by reason number one. And also the third point is that these kind of cash flow generation will bring in new groups of marginal buyers. Okay, so the growth rates Q on Q, like sequential growth rate for ASP, average selling price, and EPS may already peaked or is peaking. So that's why I think so now is the stocks may be changing hand between momentum investors that are leaving or already exited because they look at second derivative, which is growth rate. I'm not talking about that the earnings are
Hmm.
going down. It just the rates magnitude is going tapering like smaller and smaller. Yeah. So that's why now it's maybe the time for value investor to step in, and then the growth momentum investor they may leave, maybe leaving and go to other like new shiny theme.
Usually, new highs bring new highs, as new lows bring new lows.
Yeah.
So we'll see about that. Perhaps someone who's more conservative, they can do this through an ETF. Would you think that's might be safer route for a more conservative investor? I guess in order to get allocation into the AI trade in a way, but without going into single names.
If you do
Yeah,
MSCI South Korea, you get half the index, Samsung and SK Hynix.
yeah. Okay, so now I think South Korea now I think is on Interactive Brokers. So So I think that could lead to potential re-rating then for Samsung
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Hynix if this plays through and investors pile in. Rin, thank you so much. I mean, I think this was super interesting. You've really helped us better understand what's going on in AI and memory. And I'm so glad I met you. And it's one of the reasons why I've expanded on doing these events is because I meet smart people like you, and you help make me smarter. So if someone wants to reach out to you, I mean, where can they find you? Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah, just yeah, my full name, and yeah, you find me on LinkedIn.
Is that okay if I put a link to your LinkedIn? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So
And like I
okay.
said, Rin is at Kasikorn Asset Management in Bangkok. So whoever goes through Bangkok should definitely reach out to her and tap into this amazing into an amazing knowledge. So thank you, Rin. Thank you for doing this. We're actually recording on Saturday. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much for having me, and have a wonderful weekend as well. Bye bye.
Podcast episodes should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part without the prior written consent of the host. These recordings are for informational purposes only. This recording does not address all risks. The podcast is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, or investment advice, and are not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities or to adopt any investment strategy. The views and opinions of any podcast participants are subject to change and are not necessarily those of any companies affiliated or associated with the participants. The participants cannot guarantee the accuracy of the information in this podcast and has not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of such information or the assumptions on which such information is based. There is no guarantee that any forward-looking information will come to pass. Reliance upon information on this podcast is at the sole discretion of the reader and/or listener. Past performance is not indicative of current or future results. This podcast is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be used for any other purpose.